These are the 22 most brilliant minds in the history of Runeterra. The inventors and schemers and scholars whose intelligence reshaped whole nations and, in a handful of cases, bent the shape of reality itself. Some of them built wonders that still hum with quiet power beneath the great cities, while others took the world apart piece by piece, simply to learn how it had been assembled. Intelligence in Runeterra wears many faces. It can look like a tiny inventor buried under a mountain of blueprints, or a general who wins a war before the first blade is ever drawn, or a creature from beyond the edge of the world that studies a living thing the way a child studies a beetle, right before pulling it apart. What these figures share is a mind that reaches further than the people around them, and a willingness to follow that mind wherever it leads, no matter the cost to themselves or to everyone else. Over the next stretch of time, we are going to move through these minds one by one, from the workshops of Piltover to the buried libraries of Shurima, from the war rooms of Noxus to the cold emptiness of the void. Settle in, breathe slow, and let the stories carry you. We begin in the brightest and most inventive city in all of Runeterra, with the small figure who arguably started it all. Heimerdinger is the reason Piltover is called the City of Progress, and he has been alive long enough to remember when it was something far less grand. He is a Yordle, one of the small, curious beings whose true origins trace back to the hidden spirit realm of Bandle City, and like others of his kind, he has lived across a span of time that would exhaust the mind of any ordinary mortal. Where a human inventor measures a career in decades, Heimerdinger measures his in the rise and fall of technologies in whole fields of study that he opened, filled, and left behind while the rest of the world was still catching up to his first idea. His full name is Cecil B. Heimerdinger, and among the scholars of Piltover that name carries the weight of a founding legend. He helped shape the great academy that trains the city's inventors, and for a long time he held a seat among those who guided Piltover's future. Ask any young engineer in the city who the greatest mind of the age is, and the answer comes back without hesitation, because his fingerprints are on nearly every important advance the city has ever produced. The strangest thing about Heimerdinger is the sheer speed of his thinking. His mind races so far ahead of ordinary conversation that words often tumble out of him in a rushed, tangled stream. Ideas piling onto ideas before the last one has finished. He can hold a dozen half-built inventions in his head at once, jumping between them, refining each in turn, treating problems that would stump a room full of experts as pleasant little puzzles to solve before lunch. To watch him work is to watch a mind that simply does not slow down. What sets him apart from the reckless geniuses who came after him is caution, hard-won over a very long life. Heimerdinger has seen what happens when powerful discoveries are handed to people who are not ready for them. He has watched inventions meant to help turn into weapons, watched breakthroughs escape the workshop, and hurt the very city they were meant to serve. That memory has made him careful in a way younger inventors rarely understand, and it put him at odds with the great engine of change he himself helped set in motion. The clearest example is Hextech, the marriage of crystal magic and precise engineering that transformed Piltover into a marvel. Heimerdinger understood the raw power locked inside those crystals better than anyone, and he understood, too, how easily that power could slip out of control. Where others saw only wealth and wonder, he saw a force that could level the city if it were rushed to market and mishandled. His warnings put him on the losing side of a debate about how fast progress should move, and the city, hungry for the future, pushed forward anyway. There is something almost lonely about a mind like his. He has outlived collaborators and rivals alike, watched brilliant students grow old and pass on while he tinkers away, unchanged, in a workshop stacked to the ceiling with the residue of centuries of curiosity. His inventions number in the hundreds, ranging from turrets and grenades to devices whose purpose only he fully remembers. For Heimerdinger, the work is never really finished, because there is always one more idea worth chasing, one more mechanism worth perfecting, one more question worth answering before the day is done. If Heimerdinger represents the patient, cautious face of genius, the man we turn to next represents the opposite. He was Heimerdinger's equal in raw talent, and where the old Yordle held back. This one charged straight ahead into the future, hammer in hand. Jayce calls himself the Defender of Tomorrow, and the title captures both his brilliance and his enormous confidence. He is a Piltover inventor of extraordinary gifts, the kind of prodigy who seems to grasp instantly what other engineers spend years struggling to understand. Handsome, charismatic, and fully aware of both, he became a hero to the city not just for what he built, but for the swagger with which he carried it. The image of the bold genius striding out to protect his home from any threat that dared approach it. His signature creation is the transforming hextech hammer he wields, a weapon that shifts between a heavy melee form and a device that fires bursts of crystalline energy. Building it required a mastery of hextech that few besides him and Heimerdinger possessed, and using it turned him from a workshop inventor into a public defender, someone the people of Piltover could point to when they felt afraid. Where other engineers hid behind their creations, Jayce carried his out into the streets and put his own body between the city and its enemies. The tension at the center of his character is the gap between his gifts and his judgment. Jayce is genuinely brilliant, but he is also impatient, proud, and prone to believing that his instincts are always right. That confidence made him a hero, and it also made him blind to consequences that a more careful mind would have seen coming. He wanted to use hextech to protect and improve the world, and in his certainty that he alone understood how to do it, he sometimes pushed forward without fully weighing what his choices might unleash. His story is bound tightly to another mind, a former partner turned bitter rival, a man who once shared his workbench and his dreams before their paths split in the most dramatic way possible. That man believed the future belonged to machines, and Jayce came to believe just as firmly that the human spirit had to be protected from exactly that vision. The two of them, once close, became the twin poles of a great argument about what progress should mean, and how far a person should be willing to change in order to chase it. That rivalry gives Jayce his lasting weight in the lore. He is not simply a clever man with a big weapon. He is the champion of a particular idea, the belief that technology should serve people as they are, rather than remake them into something else. His intelligence, for all its arrogance, is pointed at a genuine question about the soul of a changing world. And the man he came to oppose gave that question a face, a voice, and a body slowly stripped of everything human. That man was Viktor, and his mind may be the most dangerous of any inventor Runeterra has produced, precisely because it is so clear, so cold, and so utterly convinced of its own conclusions. Born in the poisoned depths of Zorn, the sunless undercity that sprawls beneath glittering Piltover, Viktor climbed out of poverty on the strength of pure intellect, dragging himself into the halls of learning that were never meant to admit someone from below. He arrived carrying the weight of every hardship the undercity could pile on a person, and he arrived determined to fix not just his own life, but the flawed nature of humanity itself. He looked at people and saw a species crippled by its own biology. Sickness, frailty, fear, jealousy, grief, the slow betrayal of an aging body, all of it struck him as needless suffering. The result of running the mind on hardware that was never good enough. Where others accepted these things as simply part of being alive, Viktor treated them as engineering problems, defects in a system that a sufficiently brilliant designer could correct. His answer to the misery he had grown up surrounded by was to redesign the human being from the ground up. He called his vision the glorious evolution, and it was exactly as grand and as chilling as it sounds. The idea was to lift humanity beyond flesh entirely, replacing weak organic parts with tireless, precise, incorruptible machinery until the failings of the body no longer had any power over the mind. To Viktor, this was not horror but mercy, a gift he wanted to give to everyone, a way to end the endless cycle of sickness and want and pain that he had watched grind down the people of his home. He believed, with total sincerity, that he was trying to save the world. His partnership with Jayce began in genuine friendship and shared genius, two brilliant young men chasing the same dream of a better tomorrow. The two of them worked side by side on Hextech and on the frontiers of what invention could achieve, and for a time it seemed they might change the world together. What broke them apart was the question of how far a person should go, because Viktor was willing to go all the way, to remake himself and everyone else, while Jayce recoiled from the thought of trading away the very things that made people human. The most unsettling part of Viktor's transformation is what he chose to remove from himself. He did not merely swap out limbs for stronger ones. He came to see emotion itself as a flaw, a source of the irrational choices and painful attachments that he believed held humanity back, and so he set about excising his own feelings, cutting away love and fear and doubt as if they were diseased tissue. What remained was a mind of frightening purity, a pure engine of logic pursuing its conclusion without the brakes that emotion provides. Standing there in his herald body, patient and unbothered and certain, Viktor became something more troubling than a villain who wants power for its own sake. He wants to help. He genuinely believes his path leads to a world without suffering, and he cannot understand why anyone would cling to their fragile flesh and their painful feelings when he is offering to free them from both. His intelligence is not the problem. The problem is a brilliant mind that has followed a single idea so far and so faithfully that it has left ordinary human values behind, and that is a far scarier thing than mere ambition. From the grand tragedy of a man who wanted to save everyone, we turn to a much younger genius, one who came from the same poisoned streets as Viktor, but chose an entirely different path with his gifts. Ekko grew up in the Undercity too, a self-taught prodigy scavenging brilliance from the scrap and ruin of Zorn. And his story is proof that genius does not require a fine academy or a wealthy patron. Where a boy from Piltover might have inherited a workshop and a library, Ekko had garbage heaps, broken machines, and a mind sharp enough to turn other people's refuse into working marvels. Everything he knows, he taught himself, piecing together an education from whatever the harsh world above deigned to throw away. His masterwork is a device he built with his own hands, a machine strapped to his back that lets him fold time back on itself. The zero drive, as he calls it, gathers and stores temporal energy, and when Ekko triggers it, he can rewind the last several seconds of reality, undoing a mistake, dodging a blow that already landed, or trying a plan again after watching it fail. That a boy from the poorest streets in the world built a functioning time machine out of scavenged parts tells you everything you need to know about the scale of his talent. What makes the Z-Drive so striking is how personal it is. This is not a weapon handed down by a great institution or a discovery funded by a wealthy council. It is a survival tool, born from a life where a single wrong step could mean death, invented by a kid who decided that the answer to a merciless world was to give himself second chances that no one else got. Every time he rewinds, he is doing something the greatest minds of Piltover never managed. And he is doing it because he had to. Because the Undercity does not forgive mistakes, and he refused to accept that. Ekko also carries a fierce loyalty to his home, and the people in it, which sets him apart from inventors who lose themselves in abstract dreams. He is not trying to remake humanity or unlock the secrets of the universe. He fights to protect the friends and the neighborhood that raised him, using his impossible gift for something small and human and good. In a lineup of geniuses reaching for godhood and grand transformation, there is something quietly moving about a young mind that used a machine capable of controlling time to look after the people it loves. His brilliance is the kind that grows in the cracks, unwatered and unwelcomed, and thrives anyway. Ekko represents a truth that the shining towers of Piltover would rather forget, which is that the Undercity below produces minds every bit as sharp as the ones celebrated above, and that talent has nothing to do with where a person happens to be born. He turned scarcity into invention, and hardship into resolve, and he built, out of nothing at all, a device that lets him rewrite his own history, 1 second at a time. If Ekko shows us genius bent toward protecting others, the next mind shows us genius stripped of any concern for others whatsoever. He is proof that a brilliant intellect and a working conscience do not always travel together. Singed is what happens when a truly gifted mind decides that ethics are simply a variable to be removed from the equation. He is a chemist and alchemist of staggering ability, one of the finest scientific minds the twin cities of Piltover and Zorn have ever produced, and he has turned that ability entirely toward the pursuit of knowledge for its own sake, unbothered by who gets hurt along the way. To Singed, there are no forbidden experiments, no lines that should not be crossed. Only interesting questions and the methods needed to answer them. His most personal achievement is the extension of his own life. Through a lifetime of chemical mastery, Singed has kept himself alive and functional far beyond a natural span, brewing and refining the concoctions that sustain him, treating his own aging body as one more system to be studied and corrected. This is a man who looked at mortality itself and decided it was an inconvenience he could chemistry his way around, and so far he has been proven right, moving through the decades while lesser men grow old and die around him. The horror of Singed lies in his complete indifference to suffering, where Viktor at least believes he is helping, and Xerath at least wants something. Singed pursues discovery with the calm detachment of a man reading a book, and the screams of his test subjects register as data rather than tragedy. He has poisoned, transformed, and unmade countless living things in the name of understanding, and he does not appear to feel anything about it at all. His conscience is not corrupted so much as simply absent, filed away as an obstacle to clear thinking. His hand appears in some of the darkest stories in the lore, including the making of monsters out of men. When a broken, dying man was dragged to his laboratory, Singed rebuilt him into a savage engine of blood and rage, an experiment in what the body could be pushed to become, carried out with the same curiosity he might bring to a new compound. He does not create such things out of malice. He creates them because he wonders what will happen, and that motive is somehow far more chilling than hatred could ever be. There is a strange purity to the way Singed thinks, an absolute clarity that comes from having thrown away every consideration except the work itself. He does not want power, or wealth, or revenge, or even recognition. What he wants is to know, to peel back the surface of the world and see the machinery underneath, and he has decided that nothing, not law, not mercy, not the value of a life, will be allowed to stand between him and that knowing. In a strange way, he is the freest of all these minds, unchained from every restraint that binds ordinary people, and that freedom is precisely what makes him a nightmare. His genius poses a question that the story of progress keeps circling back to. What is discovery worth, and what price is too high to pay for it? Singed has answered that question in the most extreme way possible, deciding that no price is too high and no cost too cruel, and the trail of ruined lives behind him is the receipt. He stands as the shadow lurking at the edge of every bright laboratory, the reminder that a brilliant mind with no conscience is one of the most dangerous forces the world can contain. We now leave the workshops and laboratories of the Twin Cities behind and turn toward minds shaped by magic rather than machinery. The first of them carries a burden that would break almost anyone, because he has seen how every story ends and has been powerless to change a single one. Zilean was once a mage of the ancient city of Urtistan, a scholar of no small talent who devoted himself to the study of time itself, one of the most difficult and dangerous fields of magic that exists. For much of his life, he was simply a gifted academic, unraveling the secrets of how moments connect to one another, learning to nudge the flow of time in small and careful ways. He had a home, a people, and the ordinary hopes of a man who expects the future to arrive on schedule, and all of it was about to be taken from him in a single catastrophe. War came to Urtistan, and Zilean, for all his mastery, could not stop it. As his city faced destruction, he reached for the deepest and most forbidden reaches of his art, straining to reverse the disaster and pull his home back from the brink, pouring everything he had into a spell meant to undo what was happening. The spell failed to save Urtistan. What it did instead was tear Zilean loose from the ordinary flow of time entirely, scattering his consciousness across past, present, and future all at once, so that he now experiences all moments together rather than one after another. Imagine, gently, what that would do to a mind. Zilean no longer lives inside a single flowing now the way the rest of us do, seeing instead what has already happened and what is going to happen with the same clarity that we bring to the present, the future as fixed and visible to him as yesterday. He knows how conversations will end before they begin, and he knows which paths lead to ruin and which lead to safety. All of it sits inside his head at once, an unbearable weight of foreknowledge that no ordinary person could hold without shattering. The cruelest part of his gift is that knowing the future does not always mean being able to change it. Zilean failed to save his own city despite all his power over time, and that failure taught him a bitter lesson about the limits of even the greatest knowledge. He has become a wanderer through the ages, watching events unfold exactly as he foresaw, sometimes intervening in small ways, often forced to simply witness. To possess perfect knowledge of what is coming and still be unable to prevent the worst of it is a particular kind of torment, and Zilean has lived inside it for a very long time. His intelligence is unlike any other on this list, because it is not really about cleverness or invention at all. It is about perspective, the impossible vantage point of a being who stands outside the river of time and sees the whole of it at once. Where others must guess at what comes next, Zilean simply knows, and that certainty has made him strange, distant, and quietly sorrowful. A man who has already seen every ending and must live through all of them anyway. He is a scholar who learned too much, and who carries the answer to every question, along with the grief of having no power to act on most of them. Time, for Zilean, is not a mystery to be solved, but a prison to be endured. He mastered the very thing that unmade him, and in doing so he became one of the most knowledgeable beings in all of Runeterra, a living record of everything that was and everything that will be. His story is a quiet warning folded inside a marvel, the reminder that to see everything is not the same as to control anything, and that the greatest knowledge can be the heaviest chain a mind ever wears. We travel now to the golden deserts of the south, to the buried empire of Shurima, and to a mind that has spent thousands of years doing the patient work of remembering. Nasus is one of the ascended, a mortal lifted into a greater form through the ancient magic of the sun disk, and where many of his kind became warriors, Nasus became something rarer, a keeper of knowledge and history for a civilization that has otherwise crumbled into sand. Before his ascension, Nasus was already a scholar, a man whose hunger was for learning rather than conquest. He rose in the ranks of Shurima not through brute strength, but through the sharpness of his mind, becoming a respected strategist and advisor whose counsel shaped the fate of the Empire. When he was chosen to ascend, the ritual gave him the towering jackal-headed form he now wears, and it amplified everything he already was, granting an intellect and a lifespan vast enough to hold the memory of an entire age. Ascension did not turn a warrior into a thinker, it turned a thinker into something close to a living library. For millennia, Nasus has served as the guardian of Shurima's accumulated wisdom, the curator whose task is to preserve knowledge against the erosion of time. While empires rose and fell above him, he catalogued, remembered, and protected, understanding that the loss of knowledge is a kind of death from which a civilization may never recover. He watched his homeland reach unimaginable heights and then collapse into ruin, and through all of it, he held on to the memory of what had been, refusing to let the past slip entirely into forgetting. The great tragedy of his life is bound up with his own brother and with a betrayal that shattered everything. When Shurima fell, brought low by treachery at the very moment of its greatest triumph, Nasus was forced into a terrible choice to contain the disaster, to stop the traitor who had poisoned the ascension of the young emperor. Nasus sealed both that traitor and his own beloved brother away together in a tomb, trapping the two of them in an endless struggle beneath the sands. He saved what could be saved, and the cost was his own family, a sacrifice that a lesser mind might not have had the discipline to make. That decision reveals the particular shape of his intelligence, which is patient, sorrowful, and willing to bear terrible weight for the sake of something larger than itself. Nasus does not act in the heat of the moment. He thinks in centuries, weighs consequences that stretch far beyond a single lifetime, and accepts burdens that would crush anyone unable to see the longer view. His wisdom is the wisdom of someone who has watched a whole world die and has decided that the least he can do is remember it truthfully. There is a deep gentleness in him that sits strangely alongside his imposing form. For all his power, Nasus values understanding over dominance, preferring the quiet company of records and histories to the clamour of battle. He is the rare kind of genius who wants nothing for himself, only to safeguard what has been learned so that future generations might benefit from it, an intelligence turned entirely toward preservation rather than gain. In a world full of minds racing to invent, conquer, or transcend, Nasus stands apart as the one who simply wants to make sure nothing worth keeping is ever truly lost. His long vigil over Shurima connects him to the Empire's brightest and darkest chapters alike, and it also connects him to the mind we turn to next, the one whose towering ambition brought that whole golden civilization crashing down in a single afternoon. Where Nasus preserved, this one destroyed, and he did it out of a hunger for greatness that no amount of achievement could ever satisfy. Xerath began his life at the very bottom of Shurima, born into slavery with nothing to his name but a mind that would not stay quiet. From the start he was extraordinary, quick to learn and quicker to want, and he clawed his way upward from bondage into the household of the ruling family, becoming a servant and eventually a trusted companion to the young prince, who would one day become emperor. It was a rise that should have been impossible for someone born as he was, and it was powered entirely by the sheer force of his intelligence. But the higher Xerath climbed, the more the injustice of his origins burned in him. He had proven himself the equal or better of the highborn who looked down on him, and yet the deepest honours of Shurima, above all the sacred gift of ascension, were reserved for others by right of birth rather than merit. He watched lesser minds handed powers he could only dream of, and he decided that a system which would keep a man like him in chains simply because of how he was born did not deserve his loyalty. That resentment, sharpened by his brilliance, curdled into a plan of enormous ambition. Xerath threw himself into the study of forbidden magic, mastering arcane secrets that others feared to touch, all in service of a single goal, which was to seize for himself the ascension that his birth denied him. He studied the great ritual, learned its workings, and understood how it might be turned and corrupted. When the young emperor prepared to undergo the ascension ceremony, Xerath saw his chance, and he moved with the patience and precision of a mind that had been planning this moment for a lifetime. At the height of the ritual, Xerath struck, sabotaging the ceremony so that the ascension energies meant for the emperor would flow into himself instead. The plan was audacious beyond reckoning, an attempt to steal godhood from under the nose of an empire. And it very nearly worked. What actually happened was catastrophe on a scale he had not intended. The corrupted ritual detonated with world-ending force, and in a single terrible instant the great city of Shurima was reduced to ruins, its golden towers swallowed by the desert, an entire civilization undone by one man's refusal to accept his place. Xerath got his power, though not in the form he had imagined. The ascension energies transformed him, but the ritual's failure left him as a being of raw arcane force, with no true body of his own, his blazing essence held together only by ancient stone bindings, a god of magic trapped inside a broken sarcophagus. He achieved the transcendence he had schemed for and was imprisoned by it at the same moment, chained by the very ruins of the empire he destroyed, a mind of near limitless power locked away for millennia. What makes Xerath so compelling is that his intelligence was never in doubt, only his wisdom. He was perhaps the most gifted mortal Shurima ever produced, and he turned every ounce of that gift toward a single obsessive goal, letting nothing, not loyalty, not friendship, not the survival of his entire homeland, stand in the way of his ambition. His is the story of brilliance without restraint, a mind so consumed by the injustice done to it, and the greatness it craved that it burned down the world rather than accept a life of anything less than godhood. Even bound and broken, Xerath has never stopped scheming, spending the long centuries of his imprisonment plotting his return and his revenge. His patience is matched only by his hatred, and his intellect remains as keen as ever, forever calculating the path back to the power he believes was always his due. He stands as the darkest possible answer to the question of what a brilliant mind will do when the world refuses to give it what it wants, and the crater where Shurima once stood is the size of that answer. Where Xerath chased godhood and destroyed a nation reaching for it, our next mind spent his impossibly long life running in the opposite direction, trying to keep the most dangerous knowledge in the world safely hidden away. Ryze is widely regarded as one of the most powerful mages ever to live, and his intelligence lies not only in his command of magic, but in the terrible burden of understanding that he carries, a burden that has consumed centuries of his existence. Ryze studied under a great archmage in the ancient center of magical learning, and from a young age he showed a talent that set him apart even among the gifted. He mastered spells and theories that most mages spend lifetimes struggling with, and his understanding of the fundamental forces that shape the world grew deeper than almost anyone alive. That mastery might have made him a ruler, a conqueror, or a legend celebrated in every court, and instead it made him something far lonelier, a man who understood a truth so dangerous that he could never rest again. The truth Ryze carries concerns the world runes, artifacts of almost incomprehensible power that are woven into the very fabric of Runeterra. These are not ordinary magical items. Each one holds enough raw force to reshape continents, to rewrite the rules of nature, to unmake the world if used carelessly. Long ago, wars fought over these runes nearly tore all of creation apart, scarring the land in ways that have never fully healed. And Ryze learned firsthand what happens when such power falls into the wrong hands. Having seen the devastation the runes can cause, Ryze appointed himself their keeper, taking on a task that would define the rest of his existence. He wanders the world in an endless quest to find these artifacts before anyone else can. To gather them, to hide them, to keep them out of the reach of those who would use them for conquest or worse. It is a thankless, exhausting, unending labor, and he has extended his own lifespan through magic across untold years in order to keep at it, because he understands that there is no one else who can be trusted with the job. The weight of that responsibility has shaped his entire character. Ryze is gruff, weary, and often abrupt. The manner of a man who has carried an impossible burden for so long that patience has worn thin. He knows that a single mistake, a single rune left where the wrong person might find it, could doom everything, and that knowledge never leaves him. His intelligence is inseparable from his sense of duty, because it was his understanding of the rune's danger that trapped him in this role. And it is his understanding that keeps him from ever setting it down. What makes Ryze so quietly heroic is the nature of his goal, which is not to gain power, but to deny it, to himself and to everyone else. In a world full of minds reaching for greatness, Ryze uses his own considerable genius to make sure that the most dangerous forces in existence stay locked away and forgotten. He has the knowledge to become a god, and has chosen instead to become a jailer, guarding humanity against a power it is not wise enough to wield. His is the intelligence of restraint, the wisdom to understand that some things are simply too dangerous to be allowed loose in the world. He has spent centuries in this work, watching kingdoms rise and fall, staying always a step ahead of those who would seek the runes for their own ends. The loneliness of it is hard to imagine, a life measured out in vigilance, with no end in sight and no one to share the weight. Ryze endures it because he has looked at the alternative and found it unthinkable, and in that endurance there is a kind of greatness that no throne or empire could ever match. From the solitary keeper of forbidden power, we turn now to a mind that thrives in the tangled world of politics and war, where the sharpest weapon is not a spell, but a plan. Swain rules the empire of Noxus, and he did not seize that power through strength of arm alone, but through a patience and cunning that left his rivals defeated before they even understood they were in a fight. Swain is the Grand General of Noxus, the calculating mind at the head of one of the most feared and ambitious powers in all of Runeterra. He rose to that position through a long and careful campaign of strategy, outmaneuvering opponents who were stronger, richer, and better positioned than he was, using information and foresight as his primary weapons. Where other Noxian leaders trusted in brute force, Swain trusted in his mind, and his mind proved to be the deadlier instrument by far. His body bears the marks of a hard life, including grievous injuries that left him maimed, and for a time these wounds made him seem weak in the eyes of a nation that worships strength. But Swain turned even his own broken body into part of his design, making a dark bargain that traded pain for power and left him bound to a demonic force that grants him something more valuable than any healthy limb, which is knowledge. Through this pact he gained access to secrets, visions, and hidden truths, an endless flow of information that feeds his strategic mind exactly what it needs to win. The demon he is bound to whispers to him the secrets of his enemies, showing him what others try to keep hidden, and Swain uses this terrible gift with the discipline of a master tactician. He trades in secrets the way merchants trade in gold, always knowing more than the people around him suspect, always several moves ahead in a game that his opponents do not even realize they are playing. His enemies find themselves outflanked and undone by plans set in motion long before they saw any danger, defeated by a mind that had already accounted for their every possible response. What separates Swain from a mere schemer is his vision for what Noxus should be. He believes in the Empire as a place where strength and merit matter more than birth, where anyone who proves themselves worthy can rise, regardless of where they came from. He overthrew the previous ruler not simply out of ambition, but because he saw a nation being led toward ruin. And he judged that only he had the clarity and the will to steer it toward greatness. His cunning serves an ideology, and that makes him far more dangerous than a man who merely wants power for its own sake. Swain plays the longest game of anyone in Noxus, thinking not in terms of a single battle or even a single war, but in terms of the fate of an entire civilization across generations. He gathers knowledge, cultivates allies and informants, and positions the pieces on the board with a patience that borders on the inhuman, willing to wait years for a plan to bear fruit. His intelligence is the cold, strategic kind that treats the whole world as a puzzle to be solved, and he has spent his life proving that in the end. The mind that sees furthest and plans best will overcome any amount of raw strength arrayed against it. If Swain wins his battles through information and strategy, our next mind wins hers through pure deception, weaving illusions so convincing that no one can ever be sure what is real. LeBlanc is known as the Deceiver, and she stands at the head of one of the oldest and most secretive powers in all of Runeterra, a hidden hand that has shaped the fate of nations from the shadows for longer than most kingdoms have existed. LeBlanc leads a secret society called the Black Rose, an ancient order of mages and manipulators that has operated behind the scenes of Noxus for centuries, pulling strings, whispering in the ears of the powerful, and steering events toward its own hidden purposes. This is not a group that seeks open power or public glory. Its strength lies precisely in remaining unseen, in being the true force behind thrones while the people on those thrones believe themselves to be in control. To lead such an organization requires a mind of extraordinary subtlety, and LeBlanc has led it with a mastery that has kept it thriving through generations of upheaval. Her chief gift is illusion, the ability to project convincing copies of herself, to appear where she is not, to make others see and believe things that have no basis in reality. In a confrontation, she can be in several places at once, none of them quite real, leaving her enemies striking at phantoms, while the true LeBlanc watches from safety. But her illusions run far deeper than mere magical tricks in a fight. She deceives on the grand scale, manipulating perceptions, planting false beliefs, and orchestrating events so that even the outcomes people think they chose freely were in truth guided by her invisible hand. There is a genuine mystery surrounding LeBlanc's very identity, one that speaks to how completely she has mastered the art of deception. It is unclear whether she is a single woman of impossibly long life, or whether the name and role of LeBlanc have been passed down through the ages. Each deceiver training and then giving way to the next, an unbroken line hidden behind a single mask. She may be all of them and none of them, an identity rather than a person, which would make her the most perfect deception of all, a lie so complete that the truth beneath it can no longer be found. What makes LeBlanc so formidable is that she operates on a level most people never even perceive. Her enemies lose to her without understanding they were ever in a contest. Undone by schemes that unfolded across years and layers of misdirection so thick that untangling them is nearly impossible. She treats the truth as one more tool to be shaped and deployed, showing each person exactly what will move them in the direction she desires. And by the time anyone realizes they have been played, the game is already over and she is nowhere to be found. Her intelligence is the intelligence of the master manipulator, patient and endlessly layered, delighting in the game itself as much as in any prize it might win. LeBlanc understands people, their fears and their desires and the small levers that move them, and she uses that understanding to guide them like pieces on a board they cannot see. She has spent lifetimes, perhaps many lifetimes, refining this art, and the result is a mind that no one can fully trust and no one can ever quite catch. A shadow that has helped write the history of an empire without ever stepping into the light. From a mind that hides behind endless illusions, we turn to one that hides nothing at all, because it does not understand the concept of deception in the first place. Vel'Koz comes from the void, the hungry nothingness that lies beyond the edges of the known world, and it possesses an intelligence so alien and so purely analytical that it barely resembles anything we would call a mind at all. Vel'Koz is unlike the mindless, ravening creatures that usually pour out of the void to devour and destroy. Where those things act on blind hunger, Vel'Koz acts on curiosity, a cold and relentless drive to understand everything about the strange, structured world it has entered. It is a scholar in the most terrifying sense, a being that wants to know how mortal reality works down to its finest details. And it pursues that knowledge with a patience and thoroughness that no living researcher could ever match. The method by which Vel'Koz gathers knowledge is what makes it so horrifying. It studies living things by taking them apart, disintegrating flesh and matter layer by layer, analyzing each piece as it is stripped away, learning the secrets of a creature by carefully unmaking it. To Vel'Koz there is no cruelty in this, and no malice, only the pursuit of understanding, because concepts like suffering and death simply do not register as meaningful to a mind from beyond the world. It dissolves a living being with the same detached interest a scholar might bring to reading a rare book, and it learns everything that being was in the process. Vel'Koz serves as a kind of scout and observer for the void itself, studying the mortal realm and, in some sense, reporting back what it learns, gathering the knowledge that the void might one day use to unmake everything. Its intelligence is turned entirely toward comprehension, toward mapping the rules and structures of a reality that is fundamentally foreign to it. And every creature it destroys adds to that growing understanding. It is learning how our world is built, and the reason it wants to know is not comforting, because to truly understand a thing is also to understand how to take it apart. What sets Vel'Koz apart from every other mind on this list is how genuinely alien its intelligence is. The inventors and schemers and scholars we have met so far, however strange or monstrous, still think in ways we can recognize, driven by ambition or fear or curiosity we can understand. Vel'Koz thinks in a way that has no human parallel at all, weighing the world through senses and logic that belong to the emptiness beyond reality, seeing everything as data to be collected and structures to be understood. It is intelligence stripped of everything familiar, cold and clear and utterly without warmth. There is a strange purity to Vel'Koz, similar to Singed in its total absence of conscience, but even more removed from anything human. It does not hate, it does not desire power, it does not even seem to want survival in the way living things do. It simply wants to know, and it will patiently unmake the entire world one piece at a time in order to satisfy that endless analytical hunger. In the great gallery of brilliant minds that Runeterra has produced, Vel'Koz stands as the reminder that intelligence itself is not warm or kind, that a mind can be vast and sharp and endlessly curious while remaining as cold and empty as the void it came from. Not every brilliant mind reaches for its power through study or invention. Some reach for it through raw ambition, and Cassiopeia is the perfect example of a keen intelligence that refused to accept the limits placed on it, even when defying those limits cost her everything she once was. Born into the highest ranks of Noxian nobility, she had wealth, beauty, and status, and none of it was ever going to be enough for a mind as hungry and calculating as hers. Cassiopeia came from one of the most powerful families in Noxus, the daughter of a respected general, raised among the intrigues and power plays of the imperial elite. From an early age, she showed a gift for manipulation and a fierce ambition, understanding the games of court and using her charm and cunning to advance her own position. But the ordinary paths to power available to a noblewoman felt far too slow and too limited for her, and she set her sights on something greater, a source of strength that would let her rise above everyone around her. Her ambition led her into the ancient ruins of Shurima, into forbidden tombs that held secrets and powers left over from that fallen empire, places that wiser or more cautious people knew better than to disturb. Cassiopeia was neither wise nor cautious in the ways that would have protected her, but she was clever, and she believed that whatever lay in those depths could be claimed and mastered. She descended into the darkness, seeking hidden knowledge and hidden power, gambling that her intelligence would be enough to survive whatever guarded them. What she found there transformed her forever. An ancient guardian, a creature of the old world, struck her down and reshaped her body into something monstrous and serpentine, leaving her with the lower form of a great snake, a petrifying gaze, and venom running through her veins. The transformation stripped away the human beauty she had once relied upon, and it might have destroyed a weaker spirit entirely. Cassiopeia instead did what the most adaptable minds always do, which is to take the hand she had been dealt and find a way to turn it into an advantage. Rather than mourning what she had lost, Cassiopeia embraced what she had become, learning to wield her new abilities with the same calculating precision she had once brought to the games of court. Her deadly gaze, her venomous strikes, her serpentine speed, all of it became instruments in the hands of a mind that had never stopped scheming. She turned a curse into a weapon and a disfigurement into a source of dread, proving that her true power had never really been in her appearance at all, but in the sharp and ruthless intelligence that had driven her into that tomb in the first place. Cassiopeia represents a particular kind of brilliance, the kind fused with an ambition so fierce that it will risk total ruin for the chance at greater power. She gambled everything on a descent into forbidden depths, and though the gamble cost her her humanity, she refused to let it cost her purpose. Her mind adapted, reframed, and pressed forward, and she remains one of the most dangerous schemers in Noxus, a cunning and venomous intelligence that turned even its own monstrous transformation into another step on the climb toward power. We shift now from the cold ambition of the court to the warm charm of the gambling hall, and to a mind whose genius hides behind an easy smile and a deck of cards. Twisted Fate is a con artist, a card sharp, and a master of misdirection, and while he might seem at first like a simple rogue, the truth is that he is one of the cleverest and most quick-thinking minds in all of Runeterra. Twisted Fate built his reputation as the finest card player and confidence man in the port cities and gambling dens of the world. Someone who could win any game, talk his way into or out of any situation, and vanish before anyone realized they had been cheated. His intelligence is the practical, improvisational kind, the mind of a man who reads people instantly, anticipates their moves, and always seems to have an escape route planned long before he needs it. Where others study in libraries, he studied in card halls and back alleys, learning to outthink opponents who would gladly have killed him for his winnings. His signature ability adds a layer of true magic to his natural cleverness, because Twisted Fate can open gates through space, disappearing in one place and reappearing somewhere far away in the blink of an eye. This power turns an already slippery conman into someone almost impossible to pin down, allowing him to walk into the most heavily guarded room, take what he wants, and be gone before anyone can react. He treats the whole world as a stage for his tricks, and his teleportation is simply the grandest sleight of hand in a lifetime full of them. What makes Twisted Fate a genuine intellect rather than just a lucky trickster is the way he thinks several steps ahead of everyone around him. He plans his cons with elaborate care, accounts for the ways they might go wrong, and keeps hidden contingencies ready for the moment things fall apart, which in his line of work they frequently do. He has walked into countless deadly situations with nothing but his wits and a handful of cards, and he has walked out of nearly all of them, precisely because his mind works faster and sees further than those who try to trap him. Beneath the charm and the showmanship there is also a shrewd understanding of human nature, the same understanding that makes any great manipulator effective. Twisted Fate knows what people want, what they fear, and how to use both to steer them exactly where he needs them to go. He can be a companion, a rival, or a ghost depending on what the moment requires, shifting his approach with an ease that comes from a mind never caught off guard for long. His intelligence is nimble and adaptive, always in motion, always a card ahead of the game. In a collection of world-shaking inventors and empire-toppling schemers, Twisted Fate offers a reminder that brilliance comes in humbler and more charming forms as well. He is not trying to reshape reality or conquer nations. He is simply trying to win, to survive, and to stay one clever step ahead of everyone who would bring him down, and he has done exactly that for a very long time. His is the intelligence of the survivor and the trickster, proof that a sharp enough mind and a good enough plan can carry a person through dangers that raw power alone never could. From a mind that dances lightly through danger, we turn to one of the darkest and most fearsome intellects the world has ever known, a conqueror whose ambition did not stop even at the border of death itself. Mordekaiser is a name spoken with dread across the ages, and the reason for that dread is not only his terrible power, but the cold, strategic brilliance with which he wielded it. Mordekaiser lived and conquered in an age so distant that most of his story has faded into legend. But what survives paints a picture of a warlord unlike any other. He was a master of both war and dark magic, and he used the two together to carve out an empire through campaigns of ruthless, calculated conquest. This was no mindless brute smashing through his enemies. Mordekaiser planned his wars with the mind of a grand strategist, understanding logistics, loyalty, fear, and power, and bending all of them toward the single goal of domination. What separates him from every other conqueror in history is what he did after his mortal life ended. Death, which stops every other ambition cold, was for Mordekaiser merely another obstacle to be studied and overcome. Through his mastery of dark magic and the sheer force of his will, he refused to be bound by the end of his body, and he turned his conquering ambition toward the realm of the dead itself. Where other souls arrive in the afterlife as helpless shades, Mordekaiser arrived as a general, and he set about doing to the death realm exactly what he had done to the living world. He conquered the realm of the dead, subjugating the souls trapped there and building a second empire out of the afterlife, ruling over the departed with the same iron authority he had wielded in life. The audacity of this achievement is difficult to overstate, because it means that Mordekaiser looked at death, the one force that humbles every king and levels every ambition, and he treated it as territory to be seized. His intelligence, was the kind that simply refuses to accept limits, that examines even the greatest and most final of boundaries and asks how it might be broken. Behind his monstrous strength lay a mind of genuine cunning and patience, the mind of someone who thinks in terms of centuries and empires rather than single battles. Mordekaiser understood power in all its forms, physical, magical, and political, and he wove them together into a dominion that stretched across the boundary between life and death. Everything about him was calculated, from his campaigns of conquest to his mastery over the souls he ruled, and even his eventual returns to the mortal world were acts of will and strategy rather than accident. Mordekaiser stands as the ultimate example of ambition married to intellect, a mind that treated the entire cosmos, living and dead alike, as territory waiting to be claimed. Where lesser conquerors were stopped by death, he made death itself his kingdom, and where lesser minds accepted the limits of existence, he set out to break them. He is terrifying not merely because of what he can do, but because of how completely and coldly he thought his way toward doing it, an immortal strategist whose ambition recognized no boundary that could not, with enough will and enough cunning, be conquered. We leave the affairs of mortals behind for a moment and lift our gaze to the stars. Because among the minds of Runeterra there is one whose knowledge spans the cosmos itself. Aurelian's soul is a celestial dragon of ancient and almost unimaginable power, a being who existed before many of the stars in the sky and who possesses a knowledge of the universe that dwarfs anything a mortal scholar could ever hope to gather. Aurelian's soul is a creature of creation on a scale that is difficult to even picture. In the vastness of the cosmos he forged stars, shaping the raw material of the heavens into brilliant new lights. A maker of worlds and suns whose works still hang in the night sky. His mind holds an understanding of the deepest workings of the universe, the movements of the stars, the birth and death of celestial bodies, secrets of existence that no mortal could grasp even if given 1,000 lifetimes to study. To him, the concerns of kingdoms and empires are less than the buzzing of insects. For all his power and knowledge, Aurelian's soul carries a bitter grievance, because his freedom was stolen from him through trickery. Long ago, cunning beings bound him into their service, using a crown to chain his cosmic might to their own ambitions, forcing a creator of stars to labor as their servant. That a being of his intelligence and power could be trapped in such a way speaks to how deception can ensnare even the mightiest, and it left him seething with resentment toward the ones who dared to leash him. His deepest desire is to free himself and return to the endless work of creation among the stars. His intelligence carries the perspective of something truly ancient and cosmic, a mind that measures time in the lifespans of stars rather than the reigns of kings. Aurelian's soul looks at the mortal world with a mixture of contempt and impatience, seeing the schemes and struggles that consume everyone else as trivial distractions from the grand scale on which he naturally operates. His knowledge is not the practical cunning of a schemer or the focused brilliance of an inventor, but something vaster and stranger. The accumulated understanding of a being who has watched the universe itself unfold. There is a tragic irony in his situation that gives his story its weight. Here is a creature capable of creating stars, holding wisdom beyond the reach of any mortal mind. And yet he finds himself bound and diminished, forced to serve purposes far smaller than his own. His vast intelligence, for all its cosmic scope, could not prevent his enslavement, a reminder that knowledge and power, however immense, do not always protect against a well-laid trap. Aurelian's soul endures his captivity with the simmering patience of a being who knows he will outlast his captors by an eternity. Among all the minds we have explored, Aurelian's soul offers the widest lens of all, the view of a being for whom entire civilizations are brief flickers and whole worlds are passing curiosities. His intelligence belongs to the cosmos rather than to Runeterra, and it dwarfs even the greatest mortal geniuses the way a star dwarfs a candle. He is the reminder that beyond all the clever inventors and cunning schemers of the world, there exist minds whose knowledge and scale render mortal brilliance small ancient powers who understand the universe in ways the rest of us can barely begin to imagine. Returning from the cosmic to the human, we come to a mind whose intelligence is bent toward the most disturbing purpose of all. Because Jin does not build or rule or discover. He kills, and he treats killing as an art form, applying a meticulous and calculating genius to the crafting of murder in a way that is as horrifying as it is undeniably brilliant. Jin is a serial killer of extraordinary intelligence, a man who sees himself not as a criminal, but as an artist, with death as his chosen medium. Every one of his killings is planned with painstaking care, staged and arranged like a performance, designed to create a specific effect and to be witnessed and remembered. He obsesses over detail, over timing, over presentation, applying the discipline of a master craftsman to acts of terrible violence. His mind is precise, patient, and utterly committed to his grotesque vision of beauty. What makes Jin so unsettling is the genuine intellect behind the horror. He is not a frenzied madman lashing out at random, but a careful planner who studies his targets, anticipates the responses of those hunting him, and orchestrates elaborate schemes that unfold exactly as he intends. His obsession with patterns and numbers runs through everything he does, a rigid artistic logic that governs how and when and whom he kills, and that same disciplined mind makes him extraordinarily difficult to catch or predict. Jin thinks like an artist and plans like a general. For a time he was imprisoned, locked away for his crimes, but even that could not fully contain the danger he posed, because powerful factions came to see his lethal talents as a tool they could use. Released from his cell to serve as a weapon in the hidden conflicts of his homeland, Jin turned his imprisonment and his freedom alike into further opportunities to pursue his art. Manipulating the very people who believed they were controlling him, a mind like his does not simply stop scheming because it has been caged, and those who thought to wield him often found that he was wielding them. Jin represents the darkest possible fusion of intelligence and obsession, a brilliant mind that has poured all of its considerable gifts into something monstrous. His attention to detail, his strategic planning, his understanding of fear and spectacle, all of these are the marks of a formidable intellect, and all of them are turned toward creating terror. He is proof that genius carries no built-in morality, that the same careful, calculating brilliance that might build wonders can also be devoted entirely to horror when it takes root in the wrong soul. There is a chilling completeness to the way Jin thinks, a total dedication to his craft that leaves no room for hesitation or doubt. He has decided what he is and what his purpose is, and he pursues it with the focus of an artist consumed by a single vision, indifferent to the suffering it creates. Among the brilliant minds of Runeterra, Jin stands as one of the most disturbing, a reminder that intelligence turned toward cruelty and refined into obsession becomes something far more dangerous than mere madness ever could. From an artist of death, we turn to a mind that treats the entire city as a machine to be owned and operated. Because Renata Glasc built an empire not with weapons or magic, but with chemistry, influence, and an unshakable understanding of how power really works. She is one of the sharpest business minds Runeterra has ever produced, and she climbed to the heights of wealth and influence from the ashes of a childhood tragedy. Renata Glasc grew up in the poisoned Undercity, and while still young, she watched everything she had taken from her in an act of violence that destroyed her family and left her with nothing. Where such a loss might have crushed another child, it forged in her an iron determination to gain so much power that she would never again be vulnerable to anyone. From those ruined beginnings, she began a long, patient climb, using her brilliant mind for chemistry and business to build herself back up, piece by piece, into someone the whole city would come to fear and depend upon. Her fortune was built on chemtech, the potent alchemical science of the Undercity, and Renata mastered it as both a scientist and an industrialist. She created products and treatments that people came to rely on, weaving herself so deeply into the workings of the city that untangling her influence became impossible. But her true genius lies less in the chemistry itself than in how she uses it. Because Renata understands that real power comes from making others dependent on you. From holding the kind of quiet control that leaves people with no choice but to do as you wish. Renata plays the long game of obligation and dependence with a mastery that few can match. She does not force people through open threats. She positions herself so that they need her, offering them what they desperately want and then quietly holding the strings until they find themselves bound to her by their own choices and their own dependencies. It is a subtle, patient form of control, one that works through contracts and favors and carefully cultivated need rather than through violence, and it has made her one of the most powerful figures in the entire city. What sets Renata apart from ordinary schemers is the clarity of her understanding of how power actually functions in the modern world. She grasps that wealth, industry, and dependency are weapons every bit as effective as any blade, and she wields them with the precision of a master strategist. Her mind sees the whole intricate web of the city, the flows of money and need and influence, and she plucks at its threads to arrange things exactly as she desires. She turned personal catastrophe into an empire through sheer intellect and will, refusing ever again to be at anyone's mercy. Renata Glasc stands as the embodiment of a very particular kind of genius, the mind of the industrialist and the power broker, someone who conquers not through armies or spells, but through the cold, brilliant manipulation of wealth and dependency. She rebuilt herself from a devastated child into one of the most influential people in her world, and she did it by understanding, more clearly than almost anyone, how the machinery of power truly operates. Her intelligence is the intelligence of the boardroom and the laboratory combined, and in her hands it has proven every bit as formidable as the grandest magic. Not all intelligence expresses itself through invention or ambition. Some of it takes the form of a mind that grasped a single overwhelming truth and reorganized its entire existence around it, and Malzahar is exactly that kind of figure. A prophet whose conviction is rooted in a comprehension of forces that lie beyond the edge of the mortal world. He was once an ordinary man, and he became the voice of the void through a journey that reshaped everything he understood about reality. Malzahar spent his early life as a wanderer through the deserts of the south, a man plagued by strange visions and a growing sense that the world he lived in was not the whole of what existed. These visions tormented him for a long time, offering glimpses of something vast and hidden pressing against the boundaries of reality, until at last he stopped resisting them and instead sought to understand what they were trying to show him. That decision, to lean into the terror rather than flee from it, marked the transformation of a suffering man into something far stranger and more formidable. Through his visions, Malzahar came to believe he had grasped a cosmic truth that others were too blind or too frightened to see. The coming of the void and the dissolution of the world, as everyone knew it. Where most would recoil from such a revelation in horror, Malzahar embraced it as a kind of salvation, convincing himself that the emptiness beyond was not an ending to be feared, but a release to be welcomed. His mind reframed the destruction of everything into a form of deliverance, and with the certainty of a true believer, he set out to prepare the way. What makes Malzahar a figure of intelligence rather than mere madness is his ability to articulate and spread his terrible vision. He became a prophet in the fullest sense, gathering followers, spreading his message, and giving voice to the void in a way that drew others toward it. This required more than raw fervor. It required a mind capable of shaping and communicating an idea so alien that most people cannot even comprehend it, of taking the incomprehensible and rendering it into something that could win converts and inspire devotion. His is the intelligence of the visionary, persuasive and unwavering. There is a genuine tragedy folded into his story, because Malzahar's descent into prophecy began with real suffering and a sincere search for understanding. He did not set out to serve the destruction of the world. He set out to make sense of the visions that were tearing his mind apart, and the answer he found consumed him entirely, turning his search for meaning into a mission of ruin. His intelligence led him toward a truth that most minds could never bear, and rather than breaking under its weight, he reshaped himself into its herald. Malzahar stands as a reminder that comprehension is not always a blessing, and that a mind sharp enough to grasp certain truths may be changed forever by the grasping. He looked into the emptiness that lies beyond the world, and, unlike those who go simply mad, he built an entire philosophy and mission out of what he found there. His intelligence is inseparable from his conviction, a mind that understood something enormous and terrible and chose to devote itself completely to it, becoming the calm, certain voice of an ending that he alone seems to welcome. Where Malzahar surrendered his mind to the void, our next figure armed his against it, preparing with painstaking care for a journey into that same darkness. Kassadin is a man of deep learning who faced the horror of the void, not with worship, but with defiance, and who used every scrap of knowledge he could gather to make himself into something capable of walking into the emptiness and coming back out again. Kassadin was a scholar and a seeker, a man who had spent his life accumulating knowledge across many disciplines. The kind of person who understood that information is the first and most powerful weapon against any threat. When the void reached out and shattered his life, destroying what he held dear, he did not collapse into despair or flee to safety. Instead, he turned his considerable intellect toward a single purpose, which was to understand his enemy well enough to fight it, and to prepare himself for a confrontation that no sane person would ever willingly seek. His preparation was methodical and relentless, drawing on forbidden lore and dangerous artifacts that most would never dare to touch. Kassadin understood that to venture into the void, a place that unmakes ordinary people, he would need protections and powers far beyond the reach of a normal man. And so he gathered and mastered them one by one. He armed himself not only with weapons but with knowledge, studying the nature of the void, learning its dangers, and equipping himself with everything he could find that might let him survive where others would be instantly destroyed. What sets Kassadin apart is the sheer courage of applying intelligence to something so terrifying. Many minds would have been paralyzed by the horror of the void, and many others would have been consumed by it as Malzahar was. Kassadin instead treated it as a problem to be solved through careful study and thorough preparation, refusing to let fear stop him from doing what he believed had to be done. He walked willingly into the emptiness, protected by his own hard-won understanding, in pursuit of a purpose more important to him than his own safety. That purpose gives his intelligence its heart, because for all his scholarly discipline, Kassadin was driven by something deeply personal, a love and a duty that pushed him to attempt the impossible. His journey into the void was not merely an academic exercise or a quest for power. It was an act of desperate devotion, the choice of a man who decided that no darkness was too deep to enter if entering it might accomplish what he cared about most. His knowledge was the tool, but his heart was the reason. Kassadin represents the union of intellect and will in the face of the most alien threat imaginable, a mind that met horror with study and preparation rather than surrender or flight. He gathered knowledge the way a warrior gathers weapons, and he carried it into a place designed to destroy him, emerging changed but unbroken. In a world where so many brilliant minds are consumed by ambition or corrupted by the things they learn, Kassadin stands out as someone who used his intelligence as a shield and a sword against the dark, walking into the void itself and refusing to be unmade by it. We turn now from the darkness of the void to a subtler kind of danger, the danger of a beautiful smile and an outstretched hand that hides a trap. Elise is a manipulator of extraordinary skill, a woman who has preserved her youth and power across long years through a bargain most would find unthinkable, and who lures her victims to their doom with a charm that conceals a predatory intelligence. Elise was once a mortal noblewoman, and she gained her unnatural longevity and abilities by entering into a pact with a powerful spider deity, an arrangement that trades a steady supply of victims for the gift of agelessness and beauty. To keep the bargain, she must continually deliver new prey to her patron, and so she has spent long years perfecting the art of the lure, drawing unsuspecting people toward her with promises and enticements before delivering them to a fate they never saw coming. Her survival depends on her ability to deceive, and she has made deception into a fine art. Her intelligence is the intelligence of the predator who hunts not with brute force, but with patience and cunning. Elise studies her targets, learns what they desire, and presents herself as the answer to their hopes, weaving a web of charm and false promises around them until they walk willingly into her grasp. She understands human weakness intimately, the loneliness, the ambition, the greed that make people vulnerable, and she plays upon these weaknesses with the practiced ease of someone who has done it countless times before. By the time her victims realize the truth, escape is no longer possible. There is a cold calculation beneath her alluring surface that makes her genuinely formidable. Elise does not act on impulse or passion. She plans her hunts, selects her prey carefully, and manages her deceptions with the discipline of someone who cannot afford to fail, because her own continued existence depends on keeping her patrons satisfied. Every warm smile and every kind word is a deliberate move in a long game, and the contrast between her inviting exterior and the ruthless mind behind it is exactly what makes her so dangerous. Elise has maintained her position and her power across many years through this blend of manipulation and calculated cruelty, outlasting rivals and enemies who underestimated the sharpness of the mind behind the beautiful face. She occupies a place of influence among the hidden powers of her world, respected and feared by those who know what she truly is. A survivor who has thrived by understanding that the deadliest weapon is often the one that does not look like a weapon at all. Her long survival is itself proof of her cunning, because such bargains are treacherous, and she has managed hers with skill for a very long time. Among the brilliant minds of Runeterra, Elise represents the intelligence of the manipulator taken to a predatory extreme. A mind that uses charm and understanding not to build or discover, but to hunt. She reads people effortlessly, exploits their desires without hesitation, and spins her webs both literal and figurative around anyone foolish enough to trust her. Her genius is dark and self-serving, devoted entirely to her own survival and power, and it has kept her alive and dangerous through years that would have claimed anyone less clever. For our final mind, we return once more to the cosmic scale, to a being whose knowledge spans the heavens even as she wears the appearance of playful innocence. Zoe is a cosmic entity of enormous significance, a messenger of great changes whose childlike manner conceals an awareness of the universe that stretches far beyond mortal understanding. Zoe serves as a herald and a messenger for the celestial powers, an aspect of something far larger than herself. Tasked with announcing and setting in motion changes of cosmic importance. Despite the vast and serious nature of her role, she carries herself with a lightness and mischief that seems entirely at odds with her responsibilities, treating world-altering events with the carefree delight of a child at play. This contrast is one of the most striking things about her, a being of immense cosmic weight wrapped in a package of giggles and games. Beneath the playfulness lies an awareness that dwarfs anything a mortal could hold, because Zoe perceives connections and possibilities across the fabric of existence that others cannot even sense. She exists in the space between the mortal world and the cosmic realm beyond, and from that vantage point she sees things that are hidden from everyone bound to a single ordinary perspective. Her mind operates on a level where the boundaries between what is and what could be grow thin, and she moves through that shifting terrain with an ease that suggests she understands it far better than her manner lets on. The apparent innocence of her behavior may itself be a kind of mask, or simply the natural expression of a being so far beyond mortal concerns that the things people take seriously seem to her like trivial amusements. Zoe does not appear to worry, to fear, or to scheme in the way the other minds on this list do, and yet the changes she heralds can reshape the fate of the world. There is a strange wisdom in her carefree nature, the perspective of something that has seen the vast sweep of the cosmos and understands how small any single moment truly is. What makes Zoe fascinating is the gap between her role and her demeanor, between the cosmic significance of what she does and the whimsical way she does it. She is proof that intelligence and awareness do not always announce themselves through solemnity or calculation, that a mind of enormous scope can wear the face of a laughing child. Her knowledge is not the practical cunning of a schemer or the focused genius of an inventor, but something stranger and more expansive. The awareness of a being woven into the changing fabric of the universe itself. Zoe brings our journey through these brilliant minds to a close on a note of cosmic wonder, a reminder that the forms intelligence can take are as varied as the beings who possess it. From the meticulous inventors of the great cities to the cold analysts of the void, from the patient schemers of empire to this laughing messenger of the stars, the minds of Runeterra span an extraordinary range. Zoe stands at the far edge of that range, a cosmic awareness dressed in play, hinting that even the greatest mortal genius is only a small light against the vast and mysterious intelligence woven through the universe. We have travelled a long way together, from the bright workshops of Piltover to the buried libraries of Shurima, from the war rooms of Noxus to the cold emptiness of the void, and out into the stars beyond. And along the way we have met 22 of the most brilliant minds that Runeterra has ever produced. What stands out most, looking back across all of them, is how many different shapes intelligence can take, and how little any single definition can hope to contain it. We began with the inventors, the makers whose genius reshaped the physical world. Heimerdinger, ancient and cautious, watched centuries of progress flow from his tireless mind. Jayce charged into the future with a hammer and a smile, while his old partner Viktor followed cold logic all the way to the edge of humanity itself. Young Ekko built a time machine out of scrap in the poorest streets in the world, and Singed pursued knowledge with a chemist's brilliance and no conscience at all to slow him down. Each of them proved that the mind, given enough talent and enough will, can bend the material world into new and startling forms. Then came the keepers and the scholars, the minds turned toward knowledge itself. Zilean saw all of time at once, and carried the grief of a future he could not change. Nasus guarded the memory of a fallen empire across the long millennia, refusing to let its wisdom slip into forgetting. Ryze appointed himself jailer to the most dangerous power in the world, using his genius to deny rather than to gain. Their intelligence was measured not in conquest, but in the patient, lonely work of preserving and protecting what mattered most. We met the schemers too, the minds that treat the world as a board and other people as pieces. Xerath burned down a civilization reaching for godhood, and Swain won his wars through secrets and foresight before a single blade was drawn. LeBlanc wove illusions so complete that even her own identity dissolved into mystery, while Cassiopeia gambled her humanity itself on a descent into forbidden depths and turned even her curse into a weapon. Twisted fate charmed and slipped his way through every trap the world set for him, and Mordekaiser refused to let even death mark the end of his ambition. Renata Glasc built an empire out of chemistry and quiet control, and Elise lured her victims to ruin with a beautiful and predatory patience. Each of them showed that a sharp enough mind can be more dangerous than any army. And we met the truly alien intelligences, the minds that barely resemble our own. Vel'Koz studies the world by taking it apart, learning our secrets in order to unmake us. Malzahar grasped a cosmic truth so terrible that it turned him into the calm voice of an ending, and Kassadin met that same darkness with study and preparation instead of surrender. Jin poured a formidable intellect into the crafting of horror, treating murder as an art. Aurelian's soul looked down on all of it with the contempt of a being who forges stars. And Zoe danced through the changing fabric of the universe with a laughing, childlike awareness that hid a knowledge beyond anything mortal. What ties all of these figures together is not a single kind of cleverness, but the simple fact that each of them reached further than the people around them. Some reached toward creation, some toward knowledge, some toward power, and some toward destruction. And the results ranged from wonders that still hum with quiet power to craters where whole nations once stood. Intelligence, as these stories show again and again, is not good or evil in itself. It is a tool, an engine, a force that takes its shape from the hand that wields it and the heart that guides it. Perhaps that is the quiet lesson folded into all of these tales. That a brilliant mind is one of the most powerful things in any world, and one of the most unpredictable. The same gift that built Hextech wonders also stripped a man of his humanity. The same genius that preserved an empire's memory also nearly destroyed the world reaching for godhood. Again and again, the minds of Runeterra remind us that intelligence opens every door, and that what lies behind those doors depends entirely on who is doing the opening. So as we let these stories settle, picture them all together one last time, this strange gallery of geniuses spread across a world of magic and machinery and stars. The inventors bent over their workbenches, the scholars guarding their fragile knowledge, the schemers moving their invisible pieces, the alien minds studying reality from beyond its edges. Each of them burned a little brighter than the world around them, and each of them left a mark that outlasted them, for better or for worse. There is something deeply calming in tracing these brilliant lives from a safe and quiet distance, watching minds that changed everything, knowing their stories have already been written. Rest easy now, and let the brilliance of Runeterra fade gently into the dark.